Okay, we're talking with Jim Zuck, and former Hamburg assistant for many years. Jim, can you tell me about your coaching career? Take me kind of through how many years you did it, what sports you were an assistant in, and maybe you were a head coach in some as well.
Yeah. Well, I graduated from college in 1969 and always wanted to be involved in athletics, but I also was an artist. So when I came to Hamburg, I had a job at Trainer and various Rockboard, I think, had to offer in various places around the area. But Hamburg was where we did all our business, and that's where we had our ties. So I started coaching in 69, 70. And Bob Weber, who was a great coach and a great friend, he recruited me to be his assistant because he needed an assistant coach at that time. And I said, well, okay, Bob, if we can get along. And we got along. It was a good relationship for a lot of years. So I started coaching in 1969. I coached for 28 years of my 35-year teaching career, and I think I coached as an assistant to Bob for 18 years in football and track all those years. Opportunity to coach baseball, but I did not coach baseball because which was my field. I played baseball at the University of Missouri for a while, but I farmed, and Dad was having health problems, so I took care of the family farm, and it worked out really good with the coaching and teaching.
Can you tell me about? So you mentioned you're friends with Bob. Had he been coaching for a while, or is that when he started too?
No, Bob was here. I'd been here all my life. And Bob started coaching. I was trying to remember that last night, and I believe it was in 58, 59. And he had a lean year or two, but it wasn't too long that he got things rolling. And so he coached till from 59, 58 or 59, and I can't be specifics. He started, when I was in junior high. He was not my junior high coach, but he was our teacher. He was Diane, my wife's teacher. And he went from 59, I think he passed away in 86. He got a bone cancer, and that took care of it.
Well, since we're kind of top of the mind, you mentioned playing baseball at University of Missouri. Tell me about your experience doing that. Did you get recruited there, and how'd that all come about?
Well, there was an old boy. I played baseball in Hamburg for a long time, and I was a decent ball player. But I was recruited by Bernie Seigel down in he was a coach down at the University of Missouri, and I played actually 1 year at freshman year, so I didn't have any varsity time, but we played a lot of ball games. And then I transferred to Tarkio College. My father was having health problems, and it was just a better fit for me. They didn't have a baseball program at the time. They did have what they called a Ban Johnson team, and we played a lot of Ban Johnson, which was it wasn't semi-pro, but it was above a Legion ball. It's like a college ball. So we played baseball there during that time. And then I graduated actually from Tarkio College.
What position you play?
I was in baseball. I was a catcher and a pitcher.
Well, we're just kind of going to jump around a lot here. So go back to your coaching career now. Great track teams and football teams there in the 70s. What do you remember about, we won four state championships in track. Very good football team. What do you remember from those years?
Well, first of all, I think we won 4 state championships outright. And I think we were tied the next year for a state championship, I believe, if you can imagine being tied at that particular level. But I remember all the great individuals, the great athletic performances that we've had, all the fantastic people that I've met over the years.
I think I did a Where Are They Now on some of those track teams. And I don't know if I talked to you or not, but was there a relay? Wasn't there a relay you just won about 6-7 years in a row?
Yeah, we had what we call the medley relay. It was a distance medley, which actually back then we weren't metric. We were yards, and they run two 200s, a 400, and a half, and so it was a mile medley relay basically. And we had the record at state for a long time. We found out we could build track teams by having middle distance. If we had half milers, they could run a quarter. They could also run halves, and we made a lot of milers out of having good half milers. But if we get enough middle distance runners, we had a good track team.
That's great. So how do you go about that? How do you and Bob go about that? How do you just kind of said build half milers?
Well, of course, you've got to have some skill to really develop great half milers, because those kids, none of them like running. Well, I won't say that. Some of them like it, but there's a lot of kids. It takes a lot out. Teaching kids how to get everything out of the run is really difficult, and it becomes more difficult even this day and age. But it was a matter of conditioning and building up to that point. We've had freshmen that were great half milers, and then they run a lot of half miles. But we also had kids that weren't half milers that could get down to 2:08, and that's a pretty decent half mile. But the good half milers were 157s, 158s, 159s, and if you had enough of those, they could run a lot of half miles over the years and win a lot of meets for you, running back-to-back other races basically, and still run 2.3s, 2.4s, and 2.5s. But basically, Bob was the man. Bob Weber pushed him pretty good, and he knew how to work those kids. But it was dedication and hard work.
Stick on that a little bit. Names are sometimes hard to remember because you coach so many of them. Who were some of those guys that were so talented and kind of led you through those state championships?
Well, we had a lot of kids that were really determined over the years, and I can remember a kid that ran a good half mile for us. He was an Alan Coles, a great big tall 240-pound tight end for us, but he ran a 2.5 to 2.8, just enough to let us win and spread out, win some track meets. But some of the fantastic half milers we had was a little Jay Kilby, who was a quarterback for us. He ran 2 flat halves all the time. It was nothing for him to run 159 2 flat halves. We had a Arenza boy, Ralph Arenza, who was an assistant coach for us and a junior high coach, and his boys, both of them, run 2 flats and under on a regular basis. So the Arenza boys, there's a number of them. There's a big, strong kid here in town right now named Charlie Dovell, and Charlie Dovell, he won state one year, and he was ahead. I can still remember it. I can see it as plain as day right now. He was 30 yards out in the fast heat, and he throttled back and ran a 159 at state. Well, guess what? The slow heat, they had loaded it pretty good, and a kid tied him exact time, so he had to share the championship, the open half, with a 159. But we've had a lot of great runners, and the Kilbys and the Dovells and so many that I just can't name them all over the years. And those kids, it's because they believed in you, they were dedicated, they were hardworking, they had fun. A lot of things entered into it. They were pushed hard. Bob was really challenging, and he would press them. I would try to make sure they didn't get too discouraged, and we worked really pretty good together. It was a pretty good team.
Sounds a lot of coaching staffs kind of use that good cop, bad cop kind of scenario, and you were the good cop?
Well, I don't know whether I was the good cop or not, because from what I hear now, I was kind of challenging from some of the kids. Says, hey, you didn't talk to me back then like that. But yeah, that was kind of the scenario between the two of us. Try not to discourage kids, because you have to press somebody. If they want to be successful, you have to press them to the limits. If you don't, then it doesn't work. And sometimes you press, and sometimes they do it because they love you so much they'll do anything for you. So there's kind of a combination there to be successful in anything that you do.
Well, let's move on to the football side of things. I know it was a really successful 70s as well, and I know you were under Bob as the assistant football coach there for a while. About the same time frame, I assume, as track, and tell me about those successful football teams.
Absolutely. We coached together all the years that he was alive when I was coaching, and then when he passed away, I took over. Excuse me. But the football teams basically were built, we believe, on the success of the track teams. The kids were in shape. Of course, then we had a lot of farm kids, a lot of kids that worked hard. They were flexible. They were strong. We didn't have a lot of injuries. Injuries didn't slow them down quite so much. You know, the pain of the competition. But there was a lot of things that made us successful in those years. But again, the majority of it was kids, getting a number of kids and having developing the leadership with the older kids, and having the older kids help bring along the younger kids. We had young kids that were freshmen, sophomores because of the numbers that had to participate, and they had to be successful too. And so you couldn't discourage them. You had to make them believe in themselves, and you had to make those kids want to do it for you. And so it all wasn't hard work and sacrifice. It had to be fun. It had to be enjoyment. You had to teach the kids how to really enjoy what they were doing, and they did. It was just a rush of fun for coaches and for the kids. It was a good time for a long year, a lot of time, a lot of years.
You had mentioned a bunch of teams that went undefeated and didn't get to go to the playoffs. That before this interview started, we were talking about some of those teams. So can you talk about that a little bit? The coin toss thing.
Yeah, we had we had a group of kids that came in, and they were really strong. Ralph Arenza was a junior high track coach, and he had some really strong kids, and young kids, not superly big, but fast, quick, good kids. And by the time they were sophomores, they played a lot of football as freshmen. But by the time they were sophomores, these kids were really getting skilled. They were talented. And we had a good senior leadership. So we went 4 years undefeated, as I recall, in the regular season. And then I believe we went to state 1 year and got beat by a team we beat Wall Lake at Denison, I believe it was, in a swamp bowl. And then I believe we got beat by Pocahontas. And that's when these kids were sophomores. They were awful young. And after that, I don't think those kids, they never lost another ball game the rest of their career. But we could not qualify for the state because of the point system. But they were really talented. And, I can remember back then we got criticized for running scores up. And there was one time at Nation Valley, I can remember we didn't have our special teams at that time. One of the earlier games didn't have a special team set up like for punt returns and kick returns. So we put the first bunch back in, and we had to shake that up because every time they got the ball, they ran it back for a touchdown. Those kids just made it happen, and they had fun. They were physical. Game's different back then than it is today. It was played down. It's not played up like it is today. It was played down. We worked low, worked hard, and quick.
And the coin flip situation where I think you had to go to like Boone or something.
Yeah, Boone, Iowa was the state headquarters for the Athletic Association. Bernie Seigall, Rick Wilco, I think, who took that over for Bernie, I believe, back then. But we had one. I believe we tied, and I'm trying to remember right now who we tied with, and I can't do it right offhand. We may have got beat one game on that year. That might have not been the sophomore bunch that we had. But anyway, we went up to flip the coin and see who was going to go to state, and that's how it worked. The point system allowed the teams that had the most points, of course, to go, and if you played somebody out of class and won that ball game, then you had more points, and you would then therefore have more points than the guy that didn't do that, and they'd go to the state. Well, we happened to tie with another team, so we went up there, and I can remember Bernie was there, and old Rick was there, and Bob and I, come time to flip the coin, I said, Bob, you're head coach, you call it. And he called it, and we lost. We lost the toss. So that was one of the times that we didn't go to state that time, didn't qualify for state.
Moving on a little bit, I think when we were talking on the phone last week, did you mention that you got into wrestling a little bit, coaching wrestling?
Yeah, I had an assistant football coach, Bob and I both, in '86 when he passed away. Rick Johnson is a middle school principal, and he was my assistant football coach and a tremendous wrestling coach. He had a wrestling program in Hamburg that was noted all over the state and then some. And so Rick had been here a few years, and he decided to move on, to move up and to move on. And he stuck with us as long as he could. So he got his administrative degree and went to Falls City. Well, after he left, they were going to drop, all these small schools, they were squeezing for numbers, and it really got pretty drastic. And they were squeezing for money, because if you had a different superintendent come in, it was a different approach. That's just kind of the way it was. Your administration affects how these schools work. Well, as I recall, they were going to drop the program and not hire another coach. And I said, hey, look, I'll do it. I won't charge a thing. And I can't remember whether I did or not. But anyway, I coached wrestling, and I'd followed. My son was a senior, and he was wrestling. And I had a lot of kids that I just loved, and they didn't want the program dropped. So Rick Johnson's assistant, Jim Kempston, who was fundamentally fantastic, really a tough kid, and he was Rick's assistant, and he knew the techniques. And I was a weightlifter and could run the weight program and do the other management, so that's how we worked it. So we did okay. We had a good season that year, won a lot of them. I think we took a kid or two to state, and it was a good time for me. I would not say I was ever a wrestling coach, because I wasn't a good technician, and they didn't have wrestling when I went to school back in the day. But as it turned out, it was a good move, because from there on they had wrestling.
So you just did that 1 year, and then somebody else took over?
We had 1 year, yeah, and then I can't even recall, but we had another coach come in, and they took over and continued the program as long as they could.
You touched on a little bit when you were talking about the wrestling program. They're going to shut it down. Sometimes the drastic stuff obviously we've through your career and lifetime, we've seen that with Hamburg, with Southwest Iowa, with Sydney there for a little while, and then they back to Hamburg, and then Nishnabotna, and now it's not going to be Nishnabotna anymore. Can you comment on that a little bit? Obviously, it's tough for small schools right now.
Well, it was difficult as the leadership in the communities pass away, and they do. Then your support for the schools also pass away, and of course their kids go on to bigger and better things, which you want them to do. Well, we had that same situation here. We had the kids that were successful. There wasn't enough jobs around the communities, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So they moved on, went on to college, and made their lives bigger and better. Well, we couldn't get people back to these small towns, is what it amounted to. So we could see that probably the best things for Southwest Iowa, even though there was always a fight to keep the traditions that you had, the best things for the educational process for these small schools in Southwest Iowa was to start trying to share, and there was financial gains to share. So we started sharing track, first of all, with Sydney, and I was the head coach with the track thing, and we had a great time, great kids. Never a problem with kids sharing, never a problem. It's usually a problem with people that had the strong traditions from the past, and that's okay, it's understandable. So we did that, and then after so many years, they decided to go into sharing football also. And so then we shared football, and they called us the Southwest Raiders. And so I did that thing for several years, and it was successful. I think we had one team we built up. We looked like a small college team, and we played Bedford, and they beat us in another Swamp Bowl. But we could have won that game. It was a tremendous ball game, and could have, should have, didn't, but it was a close game. But they were a good ball club, and they went on, and I don't think they won state that year, but they went on, did really well at the state level. But anyway, Southwest Raiders was a good thing, and we did the track, the football. I think they shared all athletics for a while, and girls, boys, and so on. And then it got to the point that everybody, evidently there was a movement to get back to the individual things, and so that's the way they went. They went back. Each school went back to their own. Hamburg then survived a few years. I retired from coaching completely. Hamburg was successful in fielding their own teams for a few years, and then it was getting to the point that it was scary to field a football team because you had to play so many young kids. So then they realized that, and they started sharing with Farragut, which wasn't necessarily a good fit because of the distance. Mm-hmm. But the kids had a good time, and by the time they were through, they were believers in the system, and they had some good years.
I'll ask you about your family. You mentioned a son. How many kids do you have? And your wife is here as well.
Yeah, my wife, she's my high school sweetheart. I'm glad she corrects me when I'm wrong, which is quite often. But anyway, we have 3 children and 10 grandchildren. Wow. And Mark works for Pellicor over at Knoxville, Iowa, over to Pella, Iowa, and he has a great career there. I have a daughter that works for Omaha Mutual of Omaha. Which is it, Diane? Mutual of Omaha. She started that right out of college, and she's been with them a long time. She has 4 children, 1 boy and 3 girls. And then I have a daughter that's in Rolette, Texas, and they have 3 boys. One of them's the University of Northern Texas now. One of them just graduated and had a great high school career. Played in the Baylor Stadium and in the state playoffs, and played at the Cotton Bowl. And he had a great career, and he's going to join the Marines. And then they have a younger son that's in junior high. So we're kind of winding down a little bit. We chase those kids all over the place as much as we can, and we just absolutely love it.
Is it about to get crowded in here?
It's soon going to be. Mark, my son, he has 3 boys over to Knoxville, and so we can get over there and see them quite a bit too. He's a quarterback for Knoxville, Iowa, as a sophomore for Knoxville, Iowa's football team, and he had a good successful this year.
I guess my last question would be, after all the years of teaching and coaching, and here in Hamburg, you've been here all your life. What will you take? What do you kind of take from your teaching and coaching career?
Well, first of all, there's fantastic people all over here. I've been all over, not all over the United States as much as my wife would like me to take her. I've been all over the areas, and there's always fantastic people that want the best for their children. And that was no different in all these years that I've coached. So all you had to do was to do the right thing and try to get those people to support you. And they want the best for their kids. They want the best. You get a bunch of people that are in it for their children. If you get teachers and coaches that are in it for their children also, rather than just to gain in their careers, although that's a part of it, then you're going to have a very successful situation right there. And of all the years that I've taught, I think probably it's the friendships that you develop and the understanding that there's so many fantastic people in America, and they all want the best for their kids, and they all want to be a part of the program.
Jim, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to get an opportunity to pick your brain a little bit.
No problem, Derek. I appreciate the opportunity.